Today I'll be going over the Chapter 9 SPSS exercises. So in the first demonstration I'm going to show you how to produce a one-sample t-test. And the way you can do that is you go into SPSS, you go to the drop-down menus, you look for Analyze, and then drop down to Compare Means, and then look for one-sample t-test. So this test requires that you have a test value, and I'll show you how to enter in all that information right now. So here we are in GSS. We go up to Analyze, Compare Means, one sample t-test. And for the demonstration purposes, we're going to look for hours that Americans work per week, and we're going to put in our test value of 40, because we're going to assume that Americans work 40 hours a week, and then we're going to click OK. SPSS is going to spit out the data. Here we can see that the sample size is 838, we have a mean of 40.62, a standard deviation of 15.259, and we have the standard error of the mean. Down here in this box, we get our critical t value, our degrees of freedom, and then here's our significance. And as we can see, our significance is 0.242. Now the book demonstration says that we're supposed to test at a 0.01 significant level. Therefore, we would fail to reject the null hypothesis and conclude that American adults work 40 hours a week. In addition to that, it also gives us a confidence interval, 95% confidence interval for the difference. So that's how we do the one sample t-test. So for the second demonstration, we're going to produce a test of mean differences or an independent samples t-test. Now you use this when you want to find differences in means or proportions between two samples or groups. So in order to do that, we go to the Analyze, Compare Means, choose Independent Samples t-test, but in this one we have to define our groups. So we'll define our groups by the grouping variable. So for this example, we're going to go to Compare Means, Independent Samples t-test. We're going to be using the same variable as the previous example, but this time we're going to group it by the variable sex. And we need to define these groups. Group 1 is males, and Group 2 is females. We click Continue, and hit OK. And here SPSS produces our output. We've got the number of hours worked per week between males and females. So as you'll see in this output, we have equal variances assumed and equal variances not assumed. So we go here, and earlier in the chapter you talked about the Levin's test and how to determine whether the variances of the two groups are equal. In this case, you reject the null hypothesis of equal variances because the significance 0.041 is less than the alpha of 0.05. So the t value that you obtain is 6.673 and your significance is 0.000, which is smaller than 0.05. So you can reject the null hypothesis of no difference and conclude that men work significantly more hours per week than women. So the difference of 6.92 hours is significant at the 0.000 level. So for our first problem, it asks us to use the GSS10SSDS file to investigate whether or not Americans have at least 2 children per person. So we're going to use a one-sample t-test procedure to do this test with the variable childs. We're going to do the test at the 0.01 significance level. So after I show you how to produce the output, you're going to have to answer the question, what did you find? Do Americans have 2 children, more or less? In order to produce the SPS output, you go to Analyze, Compare Means, one sample t-test. We'll look for our variable childs. And our test value is going to be 2 because we want to know if Americans have 2 children. So SPSS produces the output here. So you need to take this information. Here's the t-critical value, the degrees of freedom, and our significance. And you need to analyze whether or not Americans have 2 children, more or less. Problem 2 asks us to investigate the differences between individuals who support legalization of marijuana from those who do not, based on the data from the GSS survey. Use the variable grass as your independent or grouping variable, where 1 equals legal and 2 equals not legal. You're going to investigate whether there is a significant difference between these two groups. And these groups are age, number of children, and education level. And you're going to assume that your significance is 0.05 and that you're doing two-tailed tests. And then based on your analysis, based on the output we're going to retrieve, you're going to need to write 3 step 5 type statements summarizing your findings. Okay, so we go up to Analyze, Compare Means. We're going to do Independent Samples t-test. Our first variable we're going to look at is age. And our grouping variable is going to be grass. We're going to define the groups as group 1 being legal and group 2 being not legal. So we hit continue and then we click OK. And then SPSS produces our output. So you need to look at this output and then make a step 5 type statement summarizing your findings. Afterwards, we're going to go up here, Analyze, Compare Means, Independent Samples t-test, and all we need to do here is change the test variable. So we're going to get rid of age and we're going to look for child. Throw that in here in your test variable and click OK. And then SPSS will produce your output. Then we're going to go up to Analyze, Compare Means, Independent Samples t-test. We'll get rid of child and we'll find education level. And click OK. And then here's our output from SPSS. So you need to take that output and you need to summarize your findings in order to answer this question. Problem 3 wants us to kind of work on the same kind of analysis we did in exercise 2, but this time we're going to compare individuals who support or do not support gun permits, and that variable is gun law. So we're going to use the same 3 dependent variables, age, child's, and education, to estimate the t-test. We're going to assume that our significance level is 0.05 and we're doing a two-tailed test, and we need to provide a summary for each one of these dependent variables. So we go into SPSS, Analyze, Compare Means, Independent Samples t-test. This time let's change our grouping variable. We're going to look for gun law, and we're going to define that as 1 equals support and 2 equals does not support. Hit continue and then click OK. And then here's our output for education. Since we didn't change the dependent variable, we just started with education. So there's our output for that variable. So we can go back up here and we can change the test variable to child's and click OK, and here's our output. And then we can change our test variable to age, and that's the last output you'll need in order to answer this question. So in problem 4, the GSS-10 SSDS dataset includes a measure of highest educational degree completed, and that is the variable degree. So we're going to test whether there is a significant difference between those with less than high school education, which is coded 0, and those with a bachelor's degree coded 3, in the number of hours they watch television, TV hours, and in the number of hours on the internet per week, WWWHR. We're going to assume that the alpha is of 0.05 and we're doing a two-tailed test, and then you need to summarize your findings. In order to find this output, we need to go to Analyze, Compare Means, Independent Samples t-test. Our grouping variable is going to be degree. And when we define groups, group 1 is going to be 0 and group 2 is going to be 3. So our first test variable is going to be TV hours. And then we click OK. So this will give us the output for comparing the mean number of hours that people watch TV per week according to their education. So here is less than high school, and here is bachelor's degree. And it's just like all the other outputs we've done for independent samples t-tests. You have your sample size, your mean, your standard deviation, your Levin's test for variance, the significance, your t-critical values, and your significance. So taking this data, you need to summarize your findings. For the other variable we need to test, we go up here and we run the same test, and we change out this test variable for wwwhr and click OK, and that gives us the output that we need to summarize those findings. For problem 5, you're going to be using data from the MTF 2011 survey, so make sure you change your data set or this isn't going to make any sense. So you're going to compare GPA between two racial ethnic student groups. So first you'll need to run frequencies of the variable race to take note of what each racial ethnic group is coded. In order to do that, we go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies. We look for our variable race. And then we run our frequency. So as we can see here, black is coded as 1, white is coded as 2, and Hispanic is coded as 3. So this problem wants us to select two of those as our independent or grouping variable, and then use GPA as our dependent or test variable. And then we want to calculate a t-test model for two sets of GPA comparisons, with a significance level of 0.05 running two-tailed tests, and for both models we want to summarize our findings. So we can go up here to Analyze, Compare Means, Independent Samples t-test. So our test variable is going to be GPA. We throw that over here. And our grouping variable is going to be race. And so we're going to find that as, let's do blacks as 1 and whites as 2. Click Continue and hit OK. And this will compare the mean GPAs between black and white students. And here's all the same output that we've gotten for the last few problems. And now you need to take that output and summarize your findings. And so let's do that again, but with different grouping variables. This time we're going to, let's do 3 for Hispanic and 1 for black. Hit Continue and OK. So this will then compare the mean GPA scores for Hispanic students and black students. And then you take this information and you summarize your findings. Well, that's it for this tutorial on the Chapter 9 SPSS problems. If you have any questions or if you need to come by, my office hours are Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock in Macomb 119, or you can contact me via text or email and we can set up an appointment at some other time. Thanks for watching.